Welcome to ND and Me, a podcast to share NDers' lived experiences. I'm Richard, an ND coach, mentor, accountability buddy, and business consultant. Hi, Katherine.
Hey,
talk to me. Who is Katherine?
Not who she thought she was, that's for sure. So externally, I'm probably quite a successful person. Set up a successful business, made some great decisions. I've got 2 kids, good relationship with their father, got friends, got a mother. And I've had 25 years of therapy since I was about, I think probably first wanted to die as a young teenager. So I've sought therapy on and off most all my adult life, really. Been on antidepressants for about 35 years. You will take them from me over my cold hands. I've had enormous periods of unhappiness. So there's always been a mismatch between how I present, which is a very confident, chatty, capable, socially competent, together kind of woman, and underneath it's no.
So, when did you get your diagnosis?
May 2021, so a year and a half ago.
Cool. How do you feel about that?
About when I got it, or
about having a diagnosis, having a label?
I love it. Oh, Richard, it's been brilliant. I absolutely love it. It was easily one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life, getting that diagnosis. Easily. I'm 58, and I felt like the odd one out, the not quite right person, the person would carry a huge amount of shame for all sorts of things, from inability to pick up my dirty clothes to impromptu risk-taking sexual events to behaving in business meetings in a way that makes me just die with embarrassment. So huge amounts of shame. And it didn't matter what therapy I did, and I've got the best counsellor in the universe. I'm clever, I'm bright. I've been working in kind of behavioural communication stuff for 35 odd years. I know the theory, I know why I do what I do, I know what I should do, I know techniques and strategies for learning how to do it. And the only thing that has alleviated the shame, that has allowed me to start to really rate myself, is the diagnosis. They should come with a bloody great t-shirt that says I've got ADHD and the rest of you can jog on. Don't like it? Tough.
So talk to me about neurodiversity growing up, and how you got to where you are now, and how much of that was driven by ambition versus neurodiversity making decisions for you.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm one of those people who's, I think often with neurodiversity in children, certainly my generation, so kids being brought up in the 70s really, the vast majority of children with neurodiversity in that era will have been labelled as difficult, unteachable, etc., etc. And I had an enormous advantage, not only just being quite bright, academically quite bright, but I had parents who were very, very liberal. And so when I was in trouble at school, which I was, my parents would say, well, of course Katherine would push against the rules. She's too intelligent to be taken in by silly nonsense school rules, or I remember when I was expelled, I got a scholarship based on genius to go to an all-girls school. And, 5 years later, I'm expelled. And I'm expelled because I hadn't applied myself in my O-levels. I was a discredit to the school, my behaviour, smoking behind the bike sheds. I refused to sing in assembly because I'm not a Christian. So I got expelled, and my parents' reaction to that was not, in fact, my mother had forgotten. When I came to do the diagnosis, she had completely forgotten. My parents' reaction to that was very much, Catherine's outgrown the school, she's too mature, she needs to go, she's really ready for university. And so a lot of my behaviour was sanctioned by my parents as signs of independence and maturity and rebellious, good, healthy rebellion. That's been a massive help and a massive hindrance, because it has meant I've been very confident. And I developed a sort of, we moved a lot, we travelled a lot, and so I was in a lot of new schools, and then so I would go into these new schools with a real kind of bravado of, I'm going to be the cleverest person in this school. I've travelled, I've lived in this place and this place and this place, and I can speak this language and this language and this, and you're all idiots. And I would go in with this real carapace of kind of defence. And I basically was really lonely, really afraid. I got bullied. Found it hard to make friends. But there was always an excuse for that. She's starting a new school again. And I was always good at school. So moving into adulthood, never felt I've grown up. Never. Still don't feel grown up. My ADHD has supported me to make some really good decisions that I didn't know was ADHD at the time. So I'm quite good at taking risks. I always like to give something a go. Oh, I haven't done that. Let's do that. So running a business, I didn't make, not because I'm bright, but because of the ADHD, I didn't make some of those basic errors that business people often make, in that I very, very rapidly employed people to do the finances and the admin and the coordination, because I knew I would be rubbish at it and I had no interest in it. And unknown to me, that's actually a very good thing to build a business. I was always off doing the next, chasing the next exciting idea. And so building the business came very easily, because as you grow, you've got to learn about finances. So went off, that was a hyper focus for a long time. Went off and got some training on that. I had to learn about recruitment and management of people. That was hugely interesting for a long time. Had to learn about winning and maintaining, servicing enormous contracts. That was really interesting for a long time. And my ego isn't particularly engaged. I'm very proud of what I do, what I've done. I'm very proud of the business that I've set up. But it's never been about me. And again, that's a really good quality. And so now, I retired at 52 and happy days. But and then when people say to me, oh, you must have worked so hard. No, not really. I just think the ADHD drove me to work creatively, courageously, very, very hard when I needed to, really put the hours in when I needed to, and didn't when I didn't. So yeah, did that answer your question, Richard?
I think so. I try to be thought-provoking in these questions, which is quite hard when some of us forget half the question. And then waffle. But here we go. ADHD at work.
The potential to go off on little interesting side roads, yes.
Yeah, just chase the white rabbit, and then sometimes the squirrel, and then something else. So what are you filling your time with now that you're not in work all day, every day?
I remember when I told people that I was going to retire, this what I said at the beginning about this image that people have of me. The number of people who said, "Oh, are you going to do a PhD? Or you're going to write a book? Or you're going to set up another business?" No, I'm bored. I've written a book, I've set up a business. I'm not going back to school with a bunch of 20-year-olds. No, I don't do any of that. And it kind of showed me that I masked incredibly believably for 30 odd years. And I'm probably the luckiest person you will interview, Richard. What do I do now I'm not working? I spend a lot of time on my phone chasing dopamine hits, obviously. I do what I bloody want, which is
taking appropriately measured risks like wild swimming and playing with clay.
Well, yes, I mean, I am
bowling.
If I want to do something, I'm very, very fortunate that I can do it, and I do. And so, somebody said, "Come and swim up this river," and I thought, "Oh, that sounds brilliant," because I love swimming. Love swimming. Well, used to, it was a big thing for a couple of years. Now it's not. I've never thought I was artistic or creative at all, ever. And then I got my hands on some clay. I thought that looks fun. And actually, I can be creative with clay, and I love it. And I love potters. They're very nice people. I play bowls. I just got stuffed in the ladies' singles yesterday. A bit sad. So I love bowls. It's perfect for people with ADHD.
Not waiting around for it to be your turn.
No, a little bit to chat.
Yeah,
they're all mostly older people, so they're very funny. And then you get the little dopamine hits of good woods, bad woods, winning an end, not winning an end. It's physically you're moving a lot. Learning something new. It was really good. I've spent all my life, Richard, in my head, being intellectual, being professional. And actually, most of my real self is in my emotions. So I've had to force masking when I am. I realised 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think I've ever had a thought in my life. I think everything I do comes from an emotion. It's driven by an emotion. Oh, curious. Find out about that. Oh, annoying. Sack them. Oh, brilliant. That was funny. Employ them. So I follow my emotions, I suppose, really.
So one of the next deep questions is on masking and authenticity. I've spoken to a couple of other people during the podcast about the energy taken during their lives to put on the acceptable face.
Yes.
And when that doesn't go to plan, what happens?
Yeah.
So talk to me about you masking and how you've managed to survive 30 odd years of running a company whilst being ND.
By the skin of my teeth, I think. I would probably have been fired if I'd been employed. I think there's a very, very good chance, very, very good chance that I would have struggled if I'd continued in employment. But that wasn't your question. Your question was about the weight of masking, the burden of masking. I've always thought of myself as a particularly foul-tempered, grumpy partner to any loved one. And I look back now and I think a lot of that was because I would come home after a day at work absolutely wiped out. And to then have somebody bounce up to me in the kitchen and say, "How was your day?" It's like that's another demand to behave, to act in a certain way. I've now got to tell a funny story or an interesting story, or I've got to engage with another human being, and I would just say, "Just leave me alone." So I think it took a huge toll on my private life. I remember writing. I used to write quite a lot in the work, so I would be writing pitches and tenders and proposals and web copy and stuff and job descriptions, all sorts of stuff. And I started to feel physically ill, anxious, tense, physically uncomfortable at writing what was increasingly obvious to me as rhetoric, management speak, wasn't authentic for me. And so then there were several years when obviously I delegated that, and I'm a really good delegator. But I remember standing, training people and thinking, I cannot say this again. I cannot go through this slide one more time and say these things again. I can't smile. And it's been really difficult because I think for people with NT people, we mask in order to be acceptable. And I've always had that fear. So probably don't know if it's common to NT people, that the real me is entirely unacceptable. That if I show people who I really am, that they will think you are a horrible person. So there's always been this tension for me between saying the right thing and behaving the way that people expect me to behave, still being judged and disliked for it, still being accused of being aggressive or argumentative or opinionated or whatever. And there's a huge part of me that has always wanted to say, you think this is aggressive, argumentative, difficult? You don't know what I'm not saying. That feeling.
This is 5 or 6 on the volume scale. Exactly. I can go to 11.
Yes, yes. I've always felt, since I was a young teenager, that I have a tiger inside me, that I'm controlling this tiger. And so I've always felt secure in being harassed on the street because I know that I would just unleash the tiger. I never had to test that, obviously, but so the masking is always...
You go to let it out and it's just a meow.
No. Oh my God, I'm stuck in this alley with this man. No, I'd kill him. I think I've been absolutely exhausted by it, absolutely drained by it. And when the phone rings, whether it's at work or domestically for me, when somebody phones me, my immediate feeling is, oh my God, because it's instant demand to mask. I'm making a pot, or I'm lolling on the sofa, or I'm deep in my own world, and suddenly there is a unshakable, unmistakable demand that you pretend. Suddenly you've got to be professional. So yeah, it's really difficult.
So the next question is potentially slightly tougher. And out of everybody so far agreed to come on the podcast, I don't know of anyone better placed to give a considered answer.
Spit it out.
Which comes down to running teams and having those team members butting up against each other because of differences, and that being inside and outside of neurodiversity. Maybe personality clashes are all because of neurological differences. There's some thought to go into that. But I'd love to hear how or where the line is, or how you would deal with situations that are tricky. There is a lot of drivers behind individual behavior, and if that's being driven at some level by impulsive behavior or some unconscious level of being some innate way of being rather than a considered behavior, for me that has to be so much harder to work with. It's not a considered behavior that you can then sit down and say, well, here's what I did, here's the guilt and remorse I have for doing what I do, and I'll do my best to make sure it never happens again. Well, if that behavior is impulsive, how can anyone trust your promise?
That's just wiping its bottom on the carpet. So I missed the last bit.
Well, so the question is, how help? What have you done, or what might you do if you've got people in your organization or in your team that are butting heads, and what complexities are in that mix because of neurodiversity? And would you change how you interact with them if you knew that they were neurodiverse or not? Or is the way that you would normally manage people flexible enough to manage them no matter their differences? That's not a very eloquent question.
Well, I think there's two elements to it, though, Richard. One is what would I do, and then there's the other is what would I say to other organisations to do.
What should you do and what I do?
Well, I mean, I know what I do, which is that I go. I think one of the things that my MD's given me is an enormous empathy for people who suffer, huge, and it's genuine. And I know that. So when I sit down with people when I used to sit with people who were at loggerheads at work, I was bloody marvellous at it. And I'm also not at all afraid to say to people that something is their responsibility. What do I think, as somebody who's a professional conflict resolution person who understands group dynamics and behaviours in teams and yada yada? I think that the nation, well, probably the world, there is an enormous amount of thinking that needs to go on about this, because the recourse to coaching, conventional coaching, training programs, building up skills, building up strategies, even mediation has an enormous amount of unstated assumptions in it that do not work for people who are neurodiverse. And the whole model of dispute resolution as it is at the moment is based on a premise of neurotypicality. And squaring that circle actually is going to demand it's going to demand a hell of a lot from neurotypical people. It's a bit, I suppose the equation for me is similar to white male privilege, the discomfort at having to give up some white male privilege. We see it across every social media platform, going. Many white men really, really angry that they have to even question their privilege. And I think making things equal always feels like a loss to the person who had more before. And I think asking neurotypical people to learn about neurodiversity, they'll go, "I didn't think I shouldn't have to," or or to give written instructions rather than verbal instructions, or to give people more creative space, to allow flexible working, to not expect neurotypical people's dominance of norms to be sustained. But at an individual level, that's incredibly difficult. And it can't be what's happening, as we see with any other isms. It was down to Black and ethnic minority people to fight for their equality. It's been still going on for women to fight for their equality. Any minority group has had to really go through being accused of being, hysterical, demanding, unreasonable, entitled. That's happening now. That we're on the crest of that happening for neurodiverse people. How dare we demand that employers pay more than lip service to tolerating neurodiversity? But we do, and we should. But the current frameworks are simply not ready for it. Sorry, touch the table.
Shaky camera.
It's a because then you get the neurotypical people who are saying, well, why should I have to put up with someone who's abrupt or disorganized? I can never find stuff on the system because I haven't filed it in the right place. Or why should I have to tolerate a colleague perhaps who comes and goes a little bit more at their own will rather than doing a 9 to 5, if they've negotiated flexibility about start dates, and I get that a neurotypical person's going to see that as completely unreasonable. Why should they have to put up with it? So it's that balance between it being a responsibility of the two individuals concerned, because on the one hand you think, well, let's manage the relationship between Bill and Ben, and can we support Bill and Ben at a micro level to understand each other and build a bit of tolerance, which is what most organizations will do, whether that's through management conversations or coaching or mediation. Or do we say this is not about Bill and Ben? This is about neurodiversity and neurotypicals' competing needs. And it needs to be sorted out and resolved and looked at a structural, strategic values.
Well, so something I've been banging on about recently is about person-centered employee engagement. Mm-hmm. So when you go to hospital, two people sitting next door to each other with their right toe amputated have totally different treatment plans. Now, they might have had a very similar surgery, but the drugs that are on now and how long they're on them for and the doses that they're on them for and their physio to get up and walking again is dictated by that person's ability and what level of recovery they're expecting to get to in that timeline. And when we get into a workplace setting, people are managed how the line manager wants to manage people. We don't have, a very good understanding of learning styles or communication styles. So you end up with, I'll bang the drum again about reluctant managers again, but you've got people who are technically proficient at their job, who have been promoted and given a team to work with, who aren't people, and then interact with those people how they've been interacting with people for the last 20 or 30 years, and not nuancing any of their communication depending on the needs of the individual they're communicating with. So, if somebody is, a visual learner, then do you have a flow chart that they can refer to? If they are an audible learner, then maybe giving them your instructions in 14 seconds is enough for them. And that's outside of needing the label of neurodiversity. That's just people being people. All of us have got baggage. You know, if I've had a row before I've come to work, I'm not going to bring my whole self to work, because part of me is holding energy for the stuff that I'm dealing with. And if you're neurodiverse and your life's going relatively well, you're still spending some of that energy masking, because you're not being your true self, because you don't want to upset people, or you don't want to be seen as going out of your way to upset people,
or just to be seen as weird. Odd.
So for me, the conversation when it comes into the dispute resolution space has to be at the individual level. There has to be individual accountability that rolls up into bigger things. Aidan Healy, the chair of Lexic, an organization that supports NDers, spoke on a podcast yesterday and said that line managers are the custodians of culture. So how an organization responds to neurodiversity is in those line managers.
It's manifested by the line manager, yes.
So if they're not, I don't like to use the word willing, if they're not cognizant of the challenges in that mix, then how are they ever going to adapt their style to be more supportive of the needs of the individual? And that's why there's this whole awareness conversation. So when in dispute resolution, I think that conversation about mutual understanding is needed. But how do you then grow from Bill and Ben now have a better understanding of why Bill does what Bill does? And Ben has some coping mechanisms to deal with Bill when Bill does what he does. But occasionally, there's still going to be a rub. Well, is it a get out of jail free card because I've got a diagnosis, or I'm still struggling to find the line.
Yes, am I. But I don't.
How much diverse behaviour is unacceptable, and is unacceptable and unreasonable the same thing? Because I think that acceptability is all about the standards we set ourselves, and unreasonableness, well, it depends on who you speak to. We've got a mutual friend who believes there are no unreasonable people. That's a tough conversation because everything we do is predicated on fulfilling basic human needs. So everything we do is reasonable. Okay.
That doesn't get us very far, though, does it? Really?
Well, and then comes back to that conversation about acceptability, and the standards we hold ourselves to. Well, should we be saying that NDers need to be held to a different standard? And
but we already are.
Well, we're held to the same standard as
NDers are expected to work. The fact that I think there are parallels with other minority groups, although obviously where they're a minority only depends on where they are in the world or the organisation. But if you talk to people of colour or black people about about the mask they put on going to work in a white organisation, about their experience of bringing a very selective part of themselves to work, i.e. the whitest part that they are willing to bring, and the microaggressions and the discomfort that they experience that are completely invisible to white people who have no clue that this is going on or that this is being asked of people of colour. And I think this is very similar with neurodiverse people, because neurotypical people do not know. I like your NDs, I might start using that. They don't.
Is that distracted by a cat?
Yeah, sorry.
Squirrel!
For some NT people, the idea that So let's say you've got two, oh God help them, but some teachers, and both have to mark materials. And one, for the person, the neurodiverse person, that marking of the books or whatever could be physically painful, so appalling to have to do that. that their NT colleague will just see them as someone who's perpetually complaining, grumpy, never satisfied. I shouldn't have really been a teacher if you didn't like the marking. Yeah. It's the reality of the consequences of the condition that I think NT people find it difficult to believe. And my own beloved children, one of whom loves me dearly, simply could not. And I was looking after a cat. I rescued a cat, and I had it for about a month. And I said to her, I'm not sure I'm up to looking after this cat anymore. Typical ND. There's a homeless cat. It was homeless. Take it home. Not really thinking much about it. A month later, I'm finding it almost impossible to spend enough time with the cat, to change the cat's litter box, to make sure it's got water. It was becoming physically difficult. And I said to my lovely daughter, I'm not sure how much longer I've got it in me to look after this cat. And she just said, well, everyone finds it difficult to do things on a daily basis. And this is a person who loves me.
We're all a little bit autistic.
Oh, yeah. And so I think it's to get back to my point, it's a black person can't change being black. A woman can't change being a woman. Someone who's gay can't change being gay. Someone who's neurodiverse cannot. You can't stop it. You can learn strategies for sure. But, that's demanding something extra. It sits absolutely in the equalities bit. It really does. I can't remember your question.
That's fine. We were talking about dispute resolution with NDers.
Dispute resolution with NDers. Oh yes, and what's acceptable? I'll tell you what, I find some neurotypical behaviours really unacceptable. And I can say this now.
What, like gaslighting and
all of those. Hypocrisy, gossip, one thing to one person, never say it straight to their face, owning mistakes. Will they own their mistake? Will they own their mistakes? No, they won't. But there are
they being the collective noun rather than the singular, because that confuses things. Sorry.
I have I go to a wonderful group of people. We all share an activity, and several people are neurodiverse. And in one of the groups, I go a couple of days across the week, and in one of the groups, they talk about the neurodiverse people, and I don't think they know that I'm neurodiverse. And they talk about them in a slightly patronising way. He's so lovely, isn't he sweet? The way he just focuses on his little project X. He's so helpful, though. He'd do anything for you. And I want to say, stop talking about them. Just stop. So I think some things are unacceptable that appear to be acceptable at work, that are based on neurotypical behaviours and norms. I've always been accused of being really honest. It's one of the main qualities that somebody will say, you're so honest, so refreshing, you're so honest. I think everyone should be honest. I don't understand. I do not understand why what's the trouble? Why not say I made a complete balls up of that? Or if you did.
I think there's two bits there. And the first piece is around having the confidence to be honest, because growing up, given your liberal parents, it was like, I get to own mistakes in a way that other people don't, because I don't feel shame.
That's
I'm
really
assuming
true.
I'm projecting on you.
That's really true.
So there's no need to hide it. Looking at Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety at work, why people don't speak up at work is because we are intrinsically linked, the human need for safety and being kicked out of a community in the same way as fighting a tiger or being kicked out of our tribe 2 millennia ago. It's death if you get kicked out of your tribe. So you don't speak up because you don't want to be kicked out. But I think power, being in a position of power where it's less likely that you're going to get kicked out and not feeling shame in the same way because you've lived more honestly. But then I can see how being honest is easier.
That's a really good reflection, Richard, and I'm really appreciative of it.
I feel a butt coming.
No, my early access to power, mid to late 20s, I was, a boss, an unequivocal boss, a boss without a boss, and I have a real tendency to overlook the influence of that on my life. That I have learned that there are very, very few people who will say you're wrong.
You can't do that. Well, I can do it. So
can we get the to scrap that bit? I suppose I'm more interested in the social honesty.
Being honest when it's appropriate to be, and getting back into that conversation of appropriateness, or when frankness or tactfulness play with honesty. The saying "the truth hurts" is a saying for a reason, because lots and lots of things that are truthful aren't good news.
Many people, maybe psychologically, we have to do this, see themselves as a hero in their own life. They are the hero in their life, and maybe we have to. That it's T.S. Eliot said, mankind cannot bear too much reality, and if we actually saw the truth of it, we'd have to go and end it all because it's just too awful. To
get
see.
Nihilist for a minute.
A little bit.
What's the point?
There's no point. But I have learned that when you approach people, meet people with kindness, with empathy, with understanding, with positioning of yourself as a better person, with some humility, owning your own flaws and mistakes, actually a lot of people will reflect on themselves in a way that is helpful to them. But the world we have now just doesn't allow, unless you're paying £60 an hour to a therapist or you've got an exceptional partner, very, very few of us are given access to that level of engagement from another person without an agenda. That person doesn't have their own agenda. And any kind of self-change, any kind of self-development, any kind of growth is slow and painful. And the problem at work is we want it to happen by next Monday. That's really a big ask for people. And the whole culture of Britain at the moment is eroding a sense of mutual commitment, mutual connections. It's all about, I didn't appreciate what you did, whatever that means. What about me? What about me? I don't think it's particularly career enhancing for a manager to be skilled at managing neurodiverse people. I don't think they'll get stuck as a people manager. It's not a sexy skill set to develop as a line manager, is it?
Well, and this is why I like the idea of labels being for cans, not for people. And just because you're dyslexic or dyspraxic or have Tourette's. If you're interacting with people with a level of benevolence and you're having honest conversations with them about what they need to be their best, then it shouldn't matter that they've gone through a divorce or their kids hate them or anything else, because you're looking at the individual and what the individual needs without necessarily taking in the bigger picture. You're looking at the foundation, the primer, rather than all of the colors on the top. And that doesn't mean that you're detracting from individuals being individual.
But we're living in a world of such scarcity.
Well, enforced scarcity.
We don't have time for people. We sleep less than we've ever done as a civilization. We have fewer holidays than we had more sleep, more holidays as a medieval person. You'll have had better relationships. I mean, admittedly, there were bad things, but the personal connections are the weakest they've ever been.
Well, because we're focusing on other things. Simon Sinek said, we've all got the same 24 hours in the day, and when you say that you haven't got time, what you're really saying is I don't prioritize this.
And what you're really saying when you say I don't prioritize this is this does not give me something.
Well, getting into that selfish world, and we're all, everything we do is to make sure we don't die.
Or just selfish people, but there's a huge discussion going on Mumsnet at the moment about are people less kind than they used to be, and a lot of people are posting and saying, yes, I used to be kind, and I'm over it now. I just got trampled on, taken for granted, unappreciated. So Sodom. And I understand.
I was kind, and then I experienced the world and realised nobody else was.
Right. I've got a little neighbour who's a little neighbour. She's 10 months old. She's a neighbour, and she's very little. And I look at this little baby and think how incredibly open and willing to be happy she is. And in 5 years, 4 years,
it's because they don't know all of the pressures of the world.
No, I know.
Their purpose is not dying until they get to 18 months, and then they start experiencing the world. Yeah.
The problem with being liberal in its loosest sense, the problem with helping out a neighbour, turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, doing some of the heavy lifting, giving people a helping hand. The problem with that liberality is it creates a space for other people to move in and just take more. And because we're pushing and shoving and jostling for everything now, emotionally, psychologically, I think people are, their elbows have got a little bit sharper because there's more people willing to rush into that space.
I think there's also a question about kindness changing. I think that we're far more activist now than 100 years ago.
Yes.
We're far more woke and speaking out about injustices. So 100 years ago, I would have had a very good relationship with my neighbours because I'd be growing carrots, he'd be growing cabbages, and between us, we might want to not eat cabbages or potatoes all the time. Yeah. So that kindness was innate in the communities that we had built. Well, now the communities are global, and now we can identify ourselves with groups other than the country bumpkin, because in the last 200 years we've gone from traveling no further than 50 miles away from our home in our lifetime to traveling around the world and communicating with people the other side of the world in the blink of an eye. So it's much easier in some respects to shout about stuff. So are people less kind, or are they being kind in a different way? And then we can get into the conversation of, well, actually, is being an activist for inequality kindness, or is that a projection of yourself because you're trying to promote the image of yourself? you know, are you saying it to look good, or are you standing up for it because it's wrong and you want to stand up for it?
No, I'm standing up for it because I don't want to live in a world. I'm scared to live in a world where people aren't. I wonder whether it's because I'm scared to live in a world where I have to really think about taking care of myself, making sure I'm okay, making sure that, you know, I like it better when everyone does a little bit of that for everyone. There's something if every time I get in my car and I have to drive somewhere, I have to push and push and push and shove, get into the lane, ooh, I don't want to drive like that. I like it when people go, come on, out you come, and I can go to the next person and go, out you come, and we all think, thank you, thank you. I don't want to live in a world where I have to think, you bastard, you should have let me in. I'm not letting you in. You're in a.
That's because you're doing 90 on the outside lane and not 50 on the inside lane.
And I'm late, you know. But you know, I don't want to have to be on high alert in case my rights or my freedoms or my pleasures are at risk. But as I volunteered at a food bank, and as one of the managers there said to me, have I ever had to? I was saying how interesting I found it that I was registering greed in people, in the users, and that I didn't like my own reaction. I was thinking, this is terrible. I'm thinking, oh, stop being so greedy, and I didn't like it. So I spoke to the boss about it, and she was lovely, and she said, it's a middle class luxury that I've never had to fight for anything. I've lived in a world where there's a presumption that I can give you the last piece of cake because there's more cake. But if you look at a world where there has never been enough cake, of course you're going to bloody well fight for your slice. And I like my world better. I don't mean that I mean, I like a world where we all just give and take all round. There's cake.
Cool. Addiction and ADHD go hand in hand. Talk to me about caffeine and nicotine and vices.
Oh dear, yes. Oh dear, oh God, yes. I've always thought that I've always accused myself of having a really addictive personality, and thank crikey that I never ever took hard drugs. But the reason I never even experimented with hard drugs was because I was terrified, because I have a very strong belief that, you know, one sniff of coke, I'd be a cokehead, one drop of heroin, and that would be me dead in the gutter because I'd overdosed the next, you know, just terrified of it. So I registered I had an addictive personality very, very young. I sucked my thumb until I was about 13, which surprisingly was almost the same year that I started smoking. Smoked from a ridiculously early age, again, liberal parents. And a proper smoker. None of this, oh, only when I'm out, or 5 a day. No. Serious smoker. First taste of alcohol, again, liberal parents. We want to teach you how about alcohol at home. So I was drinking alcohol from silly age. And developed a very meaningful relationship with alcohol. I've gave up cigarettes, I don't know, 12 years ago. I can't get off the nicotine gum. I mean, you know, I don't know how much I go through, but it's 60 pieces a day, maybe 50, 60, 70. Stopped drinking 10 or so years ago, 15 years ago. Thank God. Went to AA. Didn't think I was an alcoholic. Tried for a long time to stop drinking. and just did one day, just poured it down the sink and never drank again for many years. Then because I know there's a saying, if a woman takes a drink, the drink takes the woman. That's me to a T. Can't drink in moderation. You know, 1 pint is never enough. 100's never enough. All sorts of love and addiction. Coke, Diet Coke. I know it's terrible stuff. The devil. Love it. 6 cups of coffee, mugs of coffee, 2 spoonfuls of coffee in each mug. Starts my day. You know, that's a hell of a lot of caffeine. Often have a nap afterwards. Obviously, you do. Don't have a particular sweet tooth, thank goodness. But if I start a packet of Jaffa cakes, I will eat the entire box of Jaffa cakes, of course. But that's normal.
Because they're Jaffa cakes.
Because they're Jaffa cakes, yeah. But I will eat until I feel sick. Yeah.
Half moon, total eclipse. Or do you go straight? Anyway.
I just go black hole, black hole, black hole. Yeah. And of course, you know, to go back to what I said about shame, I just thought I've got no self-control. And I'm a pitiful person because I can't control my preferences. I don't want to be a smoker and a drinker. Of course I didn't.
Another question. Impulsivity. Now, I heard a story that there was something about motorbikes and Africa. Was there? How? Questions. No? You're looking at me like a go on. But I haven't heard the full story. How did you find yourself
going across Botswana on a motorbike?
Yeah.
Good idea at the time. No, the motorbiking across Africa, or parts of East Africa, let's not over-egg it. In my second year at university, I decided to take a shine to, as you do, you know, somebody who just graduated that year who was going off to do VSO. And so we had a long distance relationship for 2 years while he was doing VSO, which meant that I ended up going around on a motorbike around parts of Africa, which was fantastic. But the more spontaneous thing that I was responsible for was that I was gainfully employed, hating every minute of my job, thinking I was never ever going to find a job that I enjoyed or that I was motivated by. My poor grandmother died and left me a tiny, tiny little bit of money. So I resigned there and then. And got on an airplane and went to America. And spent 3 months travelling around America on my own. Got into all sorts of scrapes, as you can imagine. Just absolutely unsafe. Setting off across the desert in Utah in a hire car, just a regular Ford, on my own. Nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows where I'm going. No mobile phones in those days. With a bottle of Coke. That was it. That was what I had. And I remember being halfway across. I mean, it was like 12 hours of
nothing. Yeah.
6 hours. Didn't see a soul, not a car. Oh, Richard, what was I doing?
Well, I had a conversation with another mutual acquaintance of ours about the benefit of time alone for personal growth. You know, just go live on your own for a weekend or a week or a month or a few months.
Yeah.
And you learn quite a bit about yourself when there's nobody else to talk to but yourself.
Well, I've been known 5 or 6 years now. It's lovely. But it's the inability with the partner that I had that I brought my children up with. Bless my lucky stars that he was a very risk-averse person. And I learned to rely on him to tell us as a family whether something was safe or not safe, because I learned that my judgment was not always sound, and that let's take the children scuba diving in Egypt when they're 12. 12. That's a good idea. No, it's not. And he and I my children's lives were a lot safer. Oh, that chicken will be fine. Let's scrape the green bit off, the fluorescent bit. So risk taking, not assessing risk well, has always been a real issue for me, because you get a hit of dopamine. When I got to the other end of the bloody desert, I was on
I survived.
I survived. Look how tough I am. Bottle of Coke, packet of fags, done it. But so easily could have been a different story.
Are there any risks that you didn't take that you regret not taking?
No, I don't think so. Very not any that come to mind. Don't have a lot of regrets at all, I think. Other than the usual ones about parenting and. But
look, it doesn't matter how you bring up your parents. Your children will always think you did a bad job. It doesn't matter.
I love what you said. It doesn't matter how you bring up your parents.
Yeah, they'll think you're terrible too.
True. I like the fact that I've got some gusto about. Let's do it.
What's the worst that can happen? You run out of cake.
Yeah, the entire family's wiped out on a bungee board, a bungee jump, in Turkey.
Yeah, I'll bungee jump over water. Give me half a chance, but not over concrete. And any risks? Well, you just said that you didn't have any regrets. So any risks that you took that you wouldn't have taken in hindsight, which isn't necessarily a regret.
Well, no, because I'm still here. If I lost a leg, or
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It can actually break you forever, can't it? I've had some relationships with people that I profoundly regret. I've had some
wasting energy on them, or
yes, wasting emotion on them. That urge to be for me, a lot of it was an urge to be taken care of. I've stayed in relationships way too long because I couldn't face living alone. Not because I thought I was going to break down. I wouldn't feed myself. I knew that I couldn't. I did not trust myself to be a single mother, for example, because I thought the children will be hungry. There'll be no structure to their lives. It'll be chaos. There'll be great things, great fun, lots of good stuff, but also terrible things. So yeah, mostly around relationships in my lifetime, and events that were so short you couldn't possibly call them a relationship. I have a lot of those to regret.
So, something a little bit less deep. Talk to me about why you wanted to get diagnosed, what that process looked like, and what's happened in the last couple of years since getting the bit of paper.
Well, it was during COVID, I think. So it's maybe a couple of years ago that there started to be a lot more, there's even more now, but there started to be more information about ADHD on social media. There started to be stuff on my feeds that was ADHD in women. And like a lot of women, I started to think, ooh, started to do the tests, oh my God. And then during COVID, I was having phone counselling, and I said to my counsellor that I was so distressed because I had a plant growing in through the window in my living room, and I knew it was damaging the house, and it needs the window's going to buckle, and I'll have to replace the window, and it just and yet I could not find it in me to go and get my gardening tools and snip the branch, and it's coming in my house. And she, bless her, started, we'd sort of, is this the rebellious Catherine? Is this the child that needs to be taken care of? And I said, no, it doesn't feel like any of that. It just feels utterly, no, I can't, I'm blocked. I cannot do it. I want to do it. And none of the things about, I've been seeing her for 6 years or something. There was nothing to do with my childhood, nothing to do with a psychotherapeutic model of why I couldn't get the shears. And it was after that, I didn't say anything to her at the time, but after that I thought, no, I have got to get a diagnosis, because that is not, the block felt so organic, outside my control. So, very fortunate, I had to go privately. It was COVID, so it was a Zoom interview. I think it took 10 days from start to finish. It made me laugh that they make you pay for the full amount up front, because they don't trust you to remember to pay the rest, but that was all right. Didn't tell anyone. Did tell my counsellor. I remember I did tell her, and she said, I don't think you've got ADHD, in her lovely way. And I remember saying, well, we'll see. I do. I think I do. Had the session. And she told me at the end, she said, I can confirm that you do have, I am going to give you a diagnosis of ADHD. And I burst into tears. I felt just so relieved. And then it's not been quite so easy ever since then. I don't think my family and friends didn't respond when I lost one friend over the diagnosis.
Some may argue they weren't a real friend.
I contacted her and said I had a diagnosis of ADHD, and her reply was sort of along the lines of, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going on holiday next month. Blah 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 blah." And I thought, no. I asked my father, who I have a very difficult relationship with. I emailed him and said, he lives long distance from me. I said, it would mean a lot to me if you could look into what ADHD is. I told him I'd had this diagnosis, and it would really mean a lot to me if you could look into it, so that when we talk about it, you've got some knowledge. And he replied a few weeks later, it'd be so much more useful and interesting for me to hear your what it means for you, as in, couldn't be bothered, and he wasn't going to look at anything, so I talked to him about it. My other loved ones have been really disappointing variations on, we're all a little bit ADHD, or we're all on the spectrum, or I've just got some medication. That's taken 2.5 years, something like that. So I'm sitting on a little stash. Haven't taken one. Scared, but I'm not going to tell anyone. I don't want to. I've told my counsellor. I don't want to tell anyone else apart from you, Richard.
and the whole internet.
The chances of anyone I know watching this are so slim because they're not that interested in neurodiversity. Apart from my friends who are neurodiverse, I've made new friends who are neurodiverse. I love. There's a woman at my pottery class who I just really liked, and I couldn't understand. There's no reason why I would really like. I just really like that woman, and I was telling her how to do something a few weeks ago, and I said, "I'm really sorry. I've got ADHD, and I just can't shut up sometimes." And she said, "Oh, so do I." It's like
we're magnets. We just kind of like attract our kin. You're special too. So I spoke to a chap on the podcast yesterday. He's been diagnosed 8 years, and got his prescription as soon as the NHS referral came through. And he said, "Look, that there's some side effects.
Yeah,
but give it a go. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you don't know until you try. But it's about finding the right time. You don't want to jump on the bandwagon as soon as you get the prescription back from the doctor. You don't want to be sitting in your car at the chemist, popping a pill, going, "I've got it now." You might want to be a little bit more considered.
It's a tricky one though, because I've obviously lived with ADHD for so long that I'm anxious about losing my personality. I'm anxious about becoming a different person, even though I want to be a different person. I want, can you get these songs out of my head? Could you stop the blather that's going on all the time? I'd like to be able to control my mouth a little bit more.
Don't we all?
But I want. But I don't want to be like everyone. I don't want to be. I love bits of it so much. I don't want to become not me, I suppose. I was quite disappointed when I went to pick up the prescription from the chemist, because I'm thinking, they're going to come out and they're going to say, "Could you come into this room? We need to talk to you privately." This is real hardcore, heavy-duty drugs. And this lady just said,
"Threw him across the table.
28 of these. Come in tomorrow for the remainder." Oh no! I wanted everyone to know I was special.
I was like, "Do you have ID? Do you have a briefcase that's locked? Where's your armed guard?"
I'm like everyone with, many people with neurodiversity. I'm anxious about starting a regime that requires maintenance. Will I remember to take it every day? Will I remember to eat before I take it? Will I remember not to drink coffee? No, because I have 6 cups a day. Will I remember that, I've got to go and get a weigh-in and a blood test, and that means contact with the GP surgery, and I can't be bothered. And so that you've got to weigh up the entry into a world of planning and organising and appointments and a clean house.
But habits only take 60 days to form. So you can just commit yourself to doing it for 2 months.
Is that true for neurodiverse people?
Well, I haven't seen research to say it doesn't. Set an alarm.
Try it, Richard.
I've tried many things.
Try it.
So I was having a chat last night with Henry from ADHD UK and Leanne Maskell, an ADHD coach, on a ADHD UK event. And there was questions about I've got my meds, but I'd never take them. I don't normally eat until lunchtime. How am I meant to get up in the morning, have something to eat, then take my meds?
All of the above.
I'm addicted to my phone. I use my phone as my alarm clock. I don't go to sleep till 3 a.m. because I'm scrolling through my phone. What? Get an alarm clock. Leave your phone downstairs, and then take an apple or a banana to bed with you. And then when you wake up in the morning, on your bedside table, you've silenced your alarm clock. There's something to eat and your pot of pills. And it's where you need it to be. And then don't get out of bed until you've done the thing that is right where it should be. So yeah, that was a really interesting conversation. And then we had a conversation about...
This is nonsense though, Richard.
What?
Remember to buy apples or bananas. Remember to bring them upstairs when you go to bed.
All of us on the call had ADHD. We're getting there.
Did people really go, oh, that's a great idea? Or did they say...
Well, so it's the conversation about putting things where you need them to be. So if you only store your meds on your bedside table because you should have it at the beginning of the day, then they, they're not hidden in the cupboard, so you're not going to forget to do them.
Oh no, you can't have them in the cupboard. No.
So if you put your phone on charge, then go to the fridge and get an apple, then you're building a routine at bedtime. Bedtime is phone on charge, go to the kitchen, get an apple, go upstairs, turn the alarm on, go to sleep. Wake up in the morning, silence it, take a swig, eat an apple. So it's about routine, not just remembering one-off things, because it's easier to remember I do this, this, and this than I need to do that thing. I had another conversation a couple of weeks ago about people losing their keys. I have 2 sets of keys because it's easier to find one if there's 2 of them. And I try to leave them in 2 places, which is the bowl by the printer or in the door because I've locked the door. So when I go out, I unlock the door and take the key because it's in my hand. Now, when I come back from the shop and I put the keys wherever I put the thing that I bought in from the car.
It could be anywhere.
Then at least there will be a key in the bowl by the printer. But I went shopping in Cambridge the other day, and then the wife's dentist, 3 hours, got back to the car, and I was like, the wing mirrors on the car aren't folded, which means I didn't lock the car.
Yes, I never locked my car.
Last time I went to the car park, I got back to the car, got into the car, then saw the ticket on the dashboard that I hadn't taken with me to pay to get out of the car park. So it's about habit forming. Well, maybe when I get the ticket out of the machine, I shouldn't put it in that gap in the dashboard that holds it. I should put it straight in my wallet because my wallet's going to stay with me.
Yes. And I think I've learned a lot of those from just sheer pain in the past. And like you do sometimes, there are things where you reach the point of saying to oneself, this cannot go on. I will get 2 sets of keys. I very rarely lock my car. I choose the easiest possible option for everything I possibly can.
No, and that isn't being lazy, that's being efficient. Minimum viable product was invented before Google invented it. I'm not being lazy, I'm not cutting corners, I'm being efficient. You're looking thoughtful.
I'm thinking about whether I could bring an apple upstairs to bed every day, but I don't think I could.
Well, then buy 6.
But no,
and then once a week you can leave them.
I will
do it once a week.
Different habit, I've made in pottery. I made a coffee canister to hold Nescafe, whatever other brands are available. Because I've just been using it straight out of the bag, and then you tip it, and coffee's a bugger to clean up. It's always stained the surface by the time my cleaner comes to clean it up. And I was trying to make this coffee canister, and people couldn't understand why I was making it in a certain way. And I was saying to them, this has to be the easiest lid to put on and off in the world. It has to have a moment of pleasure involved in the putting on or the taking off. Otherwise, I will never put the lid on this canister, ever. And they just couldn't
get it.
No. But I know that I will not ever put the lid on. So why bother? So, I know what you mean.
And then you end up with a cube of granulated coffee because air moisture's got to it and it just turns solid.
I go through it pretty quickly. But we do create a lot of routines that we don't even realise we've made. That that I know that if I there are certain things they happen automatically. I'm pretty good at brushing my teeth at bedtime because I've done it since I was tiny. But I know for some people, neurodiverse people, that kind of routine's a killer. I don't forget what I'm doing in the shower. I've got having a shower down to about 2.5 minutes. It's
so you don't wash your hair 6 times.
And a lot of the things that, I don't shave my legs apart from the summer when I want to get brown. And I used to think that was a political feminist statement, which in part it is, but it's also because I can't be bothered. And that's the bit I never like to admit. I never really admit it to anyone. I just can't be bothered. Because it's unnecessary.
It's not a priority for you.
Well, absolutely. It's not a priority for me until my legs are out in the sunshine. And these women who get their nails done or get their eyebrows done, or I crack on. My life is so simple. I've cut everything out that is... I've got makeup on today. I haven't done makeup for years because I can't be bothered. Oh dear.
So we're coming to the end.
Huzzah!
Soon. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about? Is there some level of inner activist or inner release that you were like, I'm talking to Richard on this thing, and I really want to talk about, or maybe you came with no agenda and you don't have anything to shout about or bang on about? Or
I came with no agenda. I have nothing to shout about or bang on about, but I am very aware that I only have ADHD, and I'm aware that the quantum shift in my understanding of myself from that diagnosis there must be another quantum leap around other diagnoses that it's easy for me to say I love having ADHD. I'm very proud of having ADHD. It's I'm fabulous ADHD because I have a very benign, because of all the other things we've talked about, all the good fortunes that I've had, and the good use that I've put certain things to. It's made me very, very, I absolutely would rather not have gone around this journey. I'd rather not have been on this planet. I would rather nihilism again. Not going to kill myself, but it's generally been hard work. I've been in clothes that are too tight all my life. And I suppose I'm aware that for people who have a diagnosis of autism, borderline personality disorder, which I know is something slightly different, but there's a world, there must be the same quantum shift, leap of difference. So I feel a bit, not like a fraud, but a little.
Speaking personally, I think that a lot of that comes down to your own level of self-awareness. If I don't feel that impacted by having a label, but I'm more worried about the stigma attached to the label. I'm quite happy to share that I'm neurodiverse.
Yeah, but you don't want to explain.
But I've got cancer. Yeah, but where? Well, it's none of your bloody business where. so it's.
But isn't there a difference if you're dyslexic or if you've got a diagnosis of autism? There's quite a big difference in the.
It comes back down to those behaviours and presenting.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a whole bunch of ex-colleagues who are dyslexic, and some of them are very open about the fact they're dyslexic. And thanks to Grammarly and Spell Checker, Nobody really knows.
Mm.
And coloured post-it notes and 8 different highlighter colours. But in Aidan's session yesterday, he shared some like demographic percentages. People who struggle with spelling is about 79% of the general public struggle with spelling. There we go. Like I'm tripping over my own words. And it's only about 10% more for dyslexia. So the level of, I don't like to use the word disability, difference of ability is 10%. You know, it's not. Again, I don't like the term high functioning autistic. Well, just because you've been lucky enough to not be completely destroyed by how the condition presents itself in you doesn't mean that you're any more or less valid as a human being because of how you present. So then coming back to that, the stigma around diagnoses, so many people see, you know, the menial tasks or the unemployed people with those types of labels because, you know, they are not going to be productive to society because, you know, they are, you know, the dunces, you know, as part of that stigma. When you realize that Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, has autism. So, you know, it's that constant tension of, you know, the spectrum is very broad. And you know, a statistic came out that only 17% of people with autism have jobs. You know, that's
terrible,
appalling. And you know, there's some research at the moment with Birkbeck University underway in job seekers and neurodiversity. So how many people who are in the job market can't get a job because they aren't socially acceptable enough, don't have enough emotional intelligence to have a job. You know, you're going for a finance job and you have to sit through 2 hours worth of having a conversation with someone when actually all you need to do is sit in front of a computer and stare at a spreadsheet. Well, you know, you don't need that level of personability, social interaction, emotional intelligence to do what they're hiring you to do. So why have we got draconian ways of doing it? But, you know, the ADHD stigma, you know, it's that little tearaway kid that, you know, needs more discipline, you know, needs less sugar. Well, maybe that's just who they are. So, yeah, it's.
Have you read the Gabor Mate book?
I don't read books.
Have you listened to Gabor Mate on any podcasts?
I've listened to him talk quite a bit about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I have read his book Scattered Minds, and I would recommend it to anyone. But I struggled with it initially. I really did struggle with it because he's saying, I think he's saying that there's 2 prongs to it, that because you are neurodiverse, no, he seems to be saying that things can happen. It's about attachment during your very young childhood. And if that attachment is flawed in some way, broken in some way, that you can become ADHD, which seems very counter to you know, you're born with the condition. And he's saying, no, you're not born with the condition. You can become it. And I kind of wanted to be born with it. Thank you very much. Because it seems to me that if you're born with ADHD or autism, your parents are inevitably going to react to you differently. And that affect, you know, so there is a huge connection between parenting and how your diversity might manifest in behaviours and self-confidence, yada yada. But I'd be interested in what you thought about his Scattered Minds.
So the first piece is not discounting that ND can be acquired, but it's more likely to be acquired from trauma than it is.
So he would be saying that this is a trauma to a 3-year-old when their mother goes.
But you know, you're more likely to get Tourette's from a brain injury than you are being smacked as a kid. Now, I've got very challenging kids, and I haven't got any of them diagnosed. And Lee, one of our other guests on the podcast, has 3 kids, 2 of which are diagnosed, 2 with ADHD, 1 with ADHD and autism, and the third isn't diagnosed. He thinks he's special because there's nothing wrong with him. The conversation is the difference between the social way of looking at things and the medical way of looking at things. Because we have this diagnosis, it means something's wrong with us. Rather than saying, well, labels are just social constructs. Actually, we should be interacting with each other as human beings. And some of us are different. Some of us have blue eyes. Some of us have grey hair. Some of us are younger or older. Some of us are more frank. Some of us are more Machiavellian. Somebody called me that once. So I don't really see the value of labels unless those labels have a value, have a purpose.
It's interesting because go on.
Well, so in short, it's about ensuring people have what they need. And if you need a categorization to be able to access support, then it's a useful thing. But humans are very good at nitpicking. They're very good at looking at the negatives. You're 6 times more likely to be upset from losing something from gaining something. So
yeah, well, there you go. You wonder why organizations don't want to adapt.
Constant change is inevitable and constant. Where are we in the change curve? All over the change curve all the time, because you haven't really finished change. But there's something in there for me about my youngest son turning around calling me an R word, and me sitting there in my head going, and you probably are too, but you just don't know yet.
Nice. There's a guy who does some YouTube stuff. I like him a lot. Can't remember his name. But he does one called 15 Reasons Why You Might Have Autism. You Just Don't Know It Yet. And I watched that the other day and thought, tick, 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 and then thought, I don't want to have autism. I don't want to be autistic. I don't want to. And it has a very, very different
relationship to the word, the power of the word.
It's a much I do recognize how easy it is for me to go around and say, I have ADHD, it's great, superpower, which I don't, but it's not the same in anywhere that's close to the same stigma as autism, and a diagnosis of autism. But I probably will look into that because I'm curious. Oh, that's new. I just want to know who I am and why I do what I do and what it is to be a human being. That's just what's driven me all my life. You ask good questions about those things, what it is to be a human being. Why do we do what we do? Hard questions.
Well, that's why I do this.
And for all your ADHD viewers,
there's a cat.
Yes, isn't she beautiful?
So you've only got 3 minutes. Yes. Before you need to run away and do work things. Well, it's been lovely having you on.
Yeah, no, just finish that. Hello, this is Katherine. Lovely to have you on. Appreciate that.